Hey everyone, it's Terry with Terry's Tidbits. Last week we had our Des Moines user group meeting and we invited our friends from the dev user group to come and present some things to us on the admin side, trying to see if we could bridge the gap a little bit and maybe create some creative thinking on how we can work together as a dev and admin team. This video is a result. Hope you enjoy it. Perfect. Well, thanks again for coming, everybody. I am your host. Jackie and Joseph are also on the call. They lead our nonprofit group. We also have Jerome on the call, who leads our developer group, and we have some dev topics, and he and Karen are both going to be presenting on some fun stuff related to development. So I'm looking forward to that today, and I'm going to stop the little scrolling slides and kick off a different slide deck to kind of get us through our announcements. So give me just 1 second to switch. All right, hopefully you see the correct set of slides now, and you see our agenda for today.
Yes.
All right, cool. Thank you. And I did want to get stuff out of the way so I can see what I'm looking at. All right. Our next meeting, the one thing I did want to mention right off the bat is we have had to move the Mingle and Jingle event from being December 2nd. We are moving it to December 16th, and it will be a lunch meeting instead of a happy hour type event. So we'll hope that you're able to make that. I will get that updated in Bevy as well and send out notifications to those who have already RSVP'd. And if you can't make it, please cancel that reservation if you'd like. That way we can get a decent count of how many to expect, because I'm sure we're going to have to let whatever restaurant we end up finding know at least something close to reasonable on a count. So do hope you're able to join us on that. January 20th, I've already created the Bevy event for this one. Jen Lee is going to be our guest speaker. Jen Lee, I think I put in the Bevy thing. She's like the Oprah Winfrey of Salesforce. I mean, she's big. So if you can't make any event next year, make January 20th. I'd love to see that one tap out the number of meetings I can have, or number of people I can have inside of Zoom. So I'd love to see us come pretty darn close to hitting 100 people for her. Invite your friends, tell everybody you know, make it a priority to get that one on your calendar. The little scan code there, the QR code, you can take a snap of that with your camera, and that will take you hopefully to the RSVP page. So do come and be a part of that one. That's going to be a lot of fun. I think GearSet is going to be our sponsor for that one. So if GearSet's something that you're interested in, or if you don't know anything about GearSet, they, I believe, are going to be our sponsor.
Are we supposed to be seeing anything beyond the agenda? You said the QR code, and I don't see a QR code. That's why I was bringing that up.
Thank you. So the slide deck is not scrolling for you, is it?
Nope.
All right, let me reshare this then. Oh, it says I paused my screen. That could be why. How about now? Sweet. So there's the lunch and learn I was just talking about, December 16th, and Jen Lee with the QR code. And I hope that we have a ton of you sign up and make that event.
Is that going to be 11 to 1?
It was going to be the 11 to 1. Yes.
The QR code worked amazingly for me.
Beautiful. Look at that. I see Mitch is coming. That's awesome. Good deal. Yeah, Jen Lee is fantastic. She now works for Salesforce. She's a Salesforce evangelist. So this last year we had a couple other Salesforce evangelists come. So this will be the third one that we are going to be hosting. So it's awesome. I'm going to assume that we will have a chance to do some Q&A. I've got I follow her with the Terry's Tidbits, but if she takes the entire time, I will happily let her take over the entire meeting if you guys have a ton of questions and things you'd like to ask her. So we'll kind of play that by ear, but she will be talking on flow. And so she's like an expert on that topic. So be sure to come and invite your friends for that one. Next year for our events, we are going to go back to the quarterly large group meetings and then do more of a lunch and learn style on the off months. So February 17th, March 17th, we're going to treat those more as a lunch and learn. We'll probably go from 11:30 to 12:30 for those. And then we are going to focus again on doing some training on flow. Since process builder and workflow rules are being sunset next year or early the following year, we want to make sure that everybody is ready to go with flow. And so you'll see those lunch and learns coming.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to hear what the common practices are for migrating smaller workflows into actual flows.
Yeah.
And how to combine multiple ones all together.
Yeah, they are planning on providing a migration tool. I will tell you, most of the people that I've talked to and have said they absolutely hate the idea that they're doing that, primarily because it's a prime opportunity to re-look at all of what you've got for your automations and build them correctly or redo them. So there is going to be a tool. So for those, you can rely on it if you need to, but really I think it's a better practice to really review what you've got now and really consider if it needs to be migrated over or if it can just simply go away. So keep that in mind. That is our plan for next year. So January, it'd be then April, July, and would that be what, October? I think will be our large groups. And I'll again try to get some good names lined up, some folks that can help us with those various meetings. So kicking it off with Jen Lee. Did I mention she was coming and is going to be speaking? She's awesome. So you'll want to make sure that you come. Enough about that. All right. The next item that I wanted to mention is we do have the community office hours that are available, MVP office hours. The links I will put in our chat window in just a moment. Automation hour is something I'm guessing Jen Lee probably doesn't host that anymore, but I know that she used to. I'm going to guess now that she's with Salesforce, she's probably not allowed to. So, oh, Michelle Hansen does. Awesome. Michelle's fantastic. Thank you for that, a little update. And then, yep, leads the Eastern Iowa user group. Power of Us office hours is also really good for those of you in the nonprofit space. MVP nominations are currently open. There's a QR code for that. That is a great way to recognize those that have helped you on your journey. That's open until December 3rd. So if there's folks out there that you feel like have had an impact on your journey in Salesforce, take the time to recognize them, go out and do those nominations. That has to be in by December 3rd.
Terry, can I say something about that? Please?
Yes.
Would everybody please nominate Terry Miller? It's time for him to get an MVP, and I think we just need to blitz it. So Terry would never say it, and I'm going to say it for him. He is our leader, and we need him as an MVP. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you, Jackie. All right, great news on the DMAC front. We do have now a testing center here in Des Moines and Ankeny. DMAC has finalized that process. So if you're getting your certifications or looking to get certified, They should now show up hopefully as an option for us. So that has been a long time coming, and we're super, super excited about them getting through that process. So that is fantastic, fantastic news. Also related to DMAC, here's another QR code for you. If you are looking to get your admin certification and you want to get some training from expert people like Jackie and Joseph, then sign up for the admin certification class. This class is going to be focused completely on helping you get your admin cert. So we will go through the study guide items, and that's exactly what the agenda is going to look like. Is it's going to follow the study guide. So if that's something you're interested in, that's going to happen next year, February 2nd through March 10th. It is Tuesday and Thursday nights from 6 to 9. Jackie, Joseph, and I are leading an intro class now. Tonight's actually our last intro class. And I don't know that we've ran until 9 o'clock, except for maybe once. But either way, plan from 6 to 9 if that's something that you're interested in. The QR code and the bit.ly is there on the screen if you're interested in either of those. Fantastic opportunities. All right, and I think that's what I had for that. So let's do an icebreaker. Our icebreaker is a little bit of fun today. So what I want you to do is on your Zoom control panel, wherever I got to find mine, there is I think a React, or what's it called? I'm sharing my screen so I don't see the same thing now that you do. Yes, that little thing there with your thumbs up deal. Kevin, you did that. Where's that at, Kevin? Everybody see the react? Is it the reaction down at the bottom of the screen?
Yeah, it's a reaction.
All right, cool. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you a question, and we're going to see how similar we all are to each other. And the first question is, if I get, how similar are we? Do you have a TV or one visible from your office desk? Thumbs up if you do. I'd have to thumbs up on that. Mine's right back here. So good deal. No. All right. You sound a little bitter about that. So, all right, next one. We've got quite a few of you that had that. Let's question number 2. Gotta get back to that. Oops, question number 2. Are you using an Apple product right now to connect to the meeting? No, 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 no's. Thumbs up. Yep. I'm guilty on that side. I love my Mac. I would struggle if I had to live off of a PC. So don't hire me if you're a PC company. I'm just kidding. All right, good. Most of you are Windows people. All right, very good. I don't know why that keeps losing focus. There we are. Are you a certified admin? How many certified admins do we have? We're focusing on developers. So look at that. Yes, quite a few of you. Change your nose if need be. I probably should have asked, are you a certified developer? That would have worked too. Jerome, you could have said yes, I'm sure then. Yeah, all right, good. Awesome. So those of you who are not certified admins, there is this class coming up that DMAC is doing. It'll be fantastic. You should think about it. All right, number 4 is, did you skip breakfast this morning? Wow, look at, oh, we got a few of you. I was gonna say, man, most of you are breakfast eaters. I'm a breakfast eater. I cannot go without breakfast. I'd be dead by now, I think, if I did. Cool, 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 cool. You have at least one to-do project you've been putting off for over a year. How many are guilty of that? Those honeydew projects, you have a lot of you, it looks like. We are very common, very similar. Look at that, 100%. Nice, very nice. Did you realize that we were all this much the same? It's fantastic. How many of you receive more than 100 emails a day? Yeah. How many of you wish you didn't receive 100 emails a day? Yeah. You know, there's this product called Slack. I'm told that it's really good, that is supposed to help with this one too. Maybe talk to your Salesforce AE about that. I personally love it. I think it's a great product. Next question is, have you checked your favorite social media account in the last hour? How many addicts do we have for social media? I'm sure that we could come up with a 12-step program for you if that is needed. I don't think I have checked it in the last hour, so cool. Very good. Are you wearing shoes? Now, I know a lot of us now are working from home, and so it is very reasonable that you may not have shoes on. Mitch, you don't have shoes on today? You do have shoes. Yes, you have shoes. You are wearing shoes. Cool. Very good. I actually, normally I don't when I'm in these meetings, but I had an errand to run earlier and I didn't take them off. So I am wearing shoes. Not that you cared, but I am. You drive an SUV. Any SUV drivers? It's a reasonable number of SUVs. Very good. Awesome. And have you purchased at least one Christmas gift this year? That is coming up very soon. Have you purchased at least one? And there is this supply chain issue that I'm sure if it was ran on Salesforce, it would not be an issue, but they didn't ask us to fix it yet. So you've purchased at least one Christmas gift. Are you anybody done with Christmas? For the one person here that has said yes, that she has. Who is, let me see if I can find your name. Oh, you've said no now. Okay. No, Dan, you are done with Christmas?
I am. My wife is Johnny on the spot, and usually I slack a little bit, but the whole working from home kind of has helped with that a little bit.
That's
so
impressive, very impressive.
I was pretty happy.
My wife shared a thing with me the other day to watch out for the scam, and you order these diamond earrings and fishing poles show up instead of diamond earrings. So
wow, that would
weird
be
how that happens, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
All right, we have one more bonus question coming up here, and it is, there it is. You love the Des Moines Salesforce user group. How many people love the Des Moines Salesforce user group? I hope it's 100%. If it's not, I'll talk to you later. But yes, we all love, and you're planning to come. I probably should have made this the question. You're planning to come January 20th because we're having Jen Lee come. So you should come January 20th as well. All right, guys, thank you for playing along with that. That's kind of fun. It's just nice to kind of, oh, Sam and we have a couple people that were wearing slippers today. That's awesome. Do we have a Slack account for this group? Boone, I know you've asked me about that and I have not taken the time to set that up yet. Maybe let's use that same reaction. Or would you be interested in us having a Slack channel for our user group? And I think I'm maybe, yeah, okay. There's enough of you there that is interested in that. All right, no Slack here for Lisa. All right. It is free. So if you don't use, if you're not, if your company hasn't purchased Slack, to be a part of this channel that I would set up, you would not have a cost to do that. So that is something that we can do at no cost. All right, very good. So thanks for playing along, having a little fun with this. We are going to now turn things over to Karen. Karen has been a part of our community for quite a long time. Karen and I actually worked together back at Meredith for a while. And Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
And what I remember more of Karen is a fantastic instructor, great teacher, but she's also taken and transitioned from being an admin over to a developer, doing some dev work, and she's going to kind of share a little bit, I think, about her journey. So Karen, I'll let you kind of take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sulab and Jerome asked me to give a little talk about the career path from being a dedicated Salesforce administrator to becoming what you finally decide you can call yourself as a developer. Because a lot of us, when we start out as an administrator, you know, we may start doing things that are development related, but maybe we're a little, you know, like hesitant to say, oh, I'm officially a developer. Like I continue to feel like a little insecurity in saying that out loud, even though, you know, I can write Aura components, I write Apex classes, I debug code, I even done an API call, you know, so I believe I'm a developer. I now work at Principal Financial Group, and actually we don't even really have a heavy distinction between administrators and developers. My team, we all pick up stories. Some of those stories involve declarative development, which they should, right? Because that's the first thing you should always try to do if you can. And then some of those stories end up becoming more complex and they do require Apex. So here at Principal, we're all software engineers, regardless of whether we do mostly administrator work or developer work. So what I'm going to talk to you today about is this other concept that my friend Joseph, everybody knows, has called an Admineloper. And so that's what I'm going to talk to you today about, that transition, that like no man's land between being an administrator and a developer. If you can't officially call yourself a developer, at the very least, you can say you're an Admineloper, right? And so that's what I'm going to talk about today. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Just a second here. Oh, just a second. Let me just share that and bring that up. So my presentation today is called So You Want to Be an Admineloper, and I have narrowed this career path down to 3 easy steps. And Jerome's I'm just kind of warming up the crowd. Jerome's gonna go into the meat and potatoes of this, I believe. But I just want to talk to you about my journey and how you can, you know, I just mostly want to inspire you. For those of you who are still like, oh, I'm a little scared of code. Oh, I don't know if I really can do it. I'm here to help you take that plunge today, okay? So forging a path from Salesforce admin to Salesforce developer in 3 easy steps. So first, the important thing for us to know is to distinguish between what people call an admin and what people call a developer, right? And I've talked to friends about this. When you are just strictly a Salesforce admin, especially if you are a solo admin, which many of us have been at some point, right? Well, yeah, Kevin's nodding, where you are the Salesforce guy or gal, or, you know, you are that person. And if you do some research and you discover that a solution that the business wants is probably going to require some code, some of us, if we just have admin skills, we might just say, sorry, Salesforce doesn't do that. You know, like, oh, do you want to hire, you know, Ascend or Terry or somebody to come do something for you? You know, because I can't. So, you know, if you're an admin, there's so many things you can do. We all know that. We know that Salesforce keeps providing us additional tools to do more. You know, flow has improved so much since the days when, honestly, I think it's Terry and Justin Williams who taught me how to do flows. It's improved so much. Like there was a day when you couldn't delete records in a flow. You know, you certainly couldn't schedule a flow. You can do so many cool things. And if you have the financial services cloud, you can even do even more things. I don't know if people have experienced that, but if you have a screen, if you're doing screen flows and you have the financial services cloud, there are all kinds of really cool like goodies that you get with that package that can help you with a screen flow. But you still have limitations. Many of you know this, right? So for example, duplicate management is a pain in point and click configuration. You know, you can't, if you need to run a duplicate job, there's no automated way to just run it every night at midnight. You can log in at midnight every night and click the button and run your duplicate job. Who wants to do that? So in that scenario, that's something where I had to develop an invocable Apex and invoke it from a flow. And if I wanted that to happen, right? So that's what an admin, you know, is like. You are limited, right? Now then there's the other side, there's the developer. And Principal Financial Group's a little bit guilty of this. Those of you on the call who are from Principal, I had never heard that this was possible, but when I came to Principal, I discovered that we had hit our apex character limit in the previous year. And I didn't even know that existed, but there is such a thing, right? And so I've talked to lots of developers. I used to work with a lot of them. Cowboys and cowgirls who are like, hey, well, let me just make you a trigger, and that's all fun and good and everything. But ideally, we all know we're supposed to at least attempt to do some clicks before we do code. And that's where we get to this lovely hybrid thing called an Admineloper. What is an Admineloper? It is a hybrid version of both. So you think it's a mythical creature. Does it really exist? Well, it does, because many of us are already that, even though maybe we may not call ourselves that. We know from experience that we're supposed to do clicks first. We know how to use a flow. We keep building our experience with those process automation tools. But we know there are certain times when we're going to have to bridge that gap between what declarative development can do and what your business wants. And you have to bridge that gap with a little bit of Apex, and it's not that hard. Well, you'll find after some practice, it's not that hard. So how does an Admineloper solve problems? Well, they don't always use Apex, but when they do, they're gonna, integrate it with some kind of, point and click solution, like a flow. And I think that Jerome's gonna talk about some of this. One thing that I've done regularly is in a screen flow, if my business wanted, something very visual within that screen, it's not something that I had as an element that I could drag onto the screen. Perhaps I would create a lightning component that I could embed in my flow, and then it would be visible. It could do some various things. An inline editable data table is a really cool first project to try. And I've done that. I've embedded those in flows before, and they can help solve lots of kinds of business needs, right? Also an invocable Apex. Sometimes you find that within a flow, you can't do the queries that you really would like to do. And so sometimes you have to invoke an Apex class so it can do some more complex queries for you, right? And that's what you do. If you've got the basis, the admin background, but you start to expand, you start to bridge the gap, you try to venture out, learn new things. That's ideal. That's the sweet spot. So how do I become an Admineloper? Well, like I said, I've got 3 easy steps for you. And then Jerome is going to give you a little bit more detail. So the first step, I think, is code something. And I know that seems perhaps counterintuitive. Why would I just start coding? Don't I just have to prepare? Don't I have to arrange my office furniture, buy some books, whatever? No, start today. And that's how I did it. It's I took one little trailhead, and I'm going to recommend that here on the next page. It was called something like the lightning component quick start. I'll show you here in a minute. It's such an easy one to do. And basically it starts to show you the process. One of my old bosses at Holmes Murphy just kept telling me, yeah, if you can copy and paste, and you can be a developer, because that's what a lot of us do. You find a solution, you find a good blog where someone has presented to you the Apex controller, your markup that goes in your component part of your Lightning component, your JavaScript controller, and you can just copy and paste, and then you can start tweaking, right? You can do it. You can do it today. So yeah, if you start and just start playing around and seeing what the code actually does, that's, I think, the first step. If you do that first, you can start analyzing, you can start figuring out what does it do, and again, do this in a safe space. That's my first thing. You obviously don't want to do that in an environment where all your other people are coding, but you can create your own personal dev org, which I highly recommend, because then it's a super secure, safe place for you to experiment with no judgment. Nobody sees what you've done. Nobody encounters your errors. You can do that. You could, of course, do some things in a Trailhead playground. So if you are in a Trailhead module and, you're going through a particular module, you have to open up the playground anyway. So just experiment there after you're done with your module. Or perhaps you work in at a business where it's safe for you to spin up your own org. And that way you have some of your own custom objects and your own business functionality, process automation tools, so you can see what you experiment with it with and how it interacts with what's already in your org. Not everybody can do that. Some people are in very controlled environments where they're not allowed to create their own sandboxes, but if you can, that's a safe place to do it. So some of the resources I was talking about. So first of all, if you're going to copy and paste, you need to know where to copy and paste code, and that's where I would recommend doing a quick trailhead on the developer console. Lightning Aura components can still be developed in the developer console. If you ever want to really expand and learn how to do a Lightning Web component, you'll discover you cannot do that in the developer console. You need something like Visual Studio Code or something like that. But Aura components I do recommend as a good first project to start with, and you can use your developer console for that. So that trailhead listed there, if you Google it, is a good one to start with. As I mentioned, the one I started with is called Quick Start Aura Components, and it still exists, even though I did it a few years ago. And so I would highly recommend that one. Also, look for good bloggers. If you've already tried to do some Googling for solutions to various problems, you might find that there are a lot of bad bloggers out there. There are a lot of people who just assume a lot of knowledge that you don't quite have. My favorite bloggers are the ones who just give you the code. They don't go into they're not trying to impress you. They're not trying to be fancy. They're just here's your Apex controller, here's your markup, here's your JavaScript controller, have at it. And that's my favorite, because then you can, like I said, copy, you could paste, and then you can discover yourself what works, what doesn't work. So two that I have used specifically when I wanted to build an editable Lightning data table, which I really highly recommend you might try. They're fun. Infallible Techie is one person that I feel is pretty reasonable. And again, when I go to his page, it's boom, here's my code, nothing fancy. Likewise, SFDC Facts, a man named Manish Chowdhury runs that one, and same thing. He's got his code outlined very well. When I copy and I paste it, I don't really get any errors, which that's another problem you might encounter with some bloggers. They've given you some bad syntax, and it's what the heck? And then you have to debug in addition to trying to figure out what they're trying to do. Those are two guys I recommend. Step two, after you've done some damage, you've put some code into a developer console in some safe space. Obviously, you'll probably encounter some errors of some kind, right? Especially when you start tweaking, you start adjusting SQL queries, etc. And so that's a good time for you to try to reach out, find yourself a mentor. Again, many of us, or many of you, probably are solo admins. Maybe there's nobody else, right? And so nobody else in your company who knows Salesforce. But do you know where there are plenty of people? This place. So if you're not already, reaching out to the members of this Des Moines User Group Committee, start doing it today. These are all nice people. I think I can speak to the majority of us. We geek out about Salesforce. We love helping people. I don't know. I think it's all in our blood. I think that's why we're here. And so if you've started to make a connection with any of the people, any of our leaders, any of the people who just participate or contribute, reach out to them. If they can't help you, they probably can find somebody who can. So I really highly recommend, when you're ready, find somebody that has some good skills and start seeing if that person wants to talk to you about your code. You can demonstrate it to them. You can share screens. You can say, hey, I'm getting this little JavaScript error. How do I debug it? And they can perhaps help you. And then the final step, challenge yourself. So once you've started to experiment, don't be afraid to take on difficult projects. That's what I did. Now, part of the problem might be that you're in a company where maybe you're not given, the amount of time that you might need to develop. And I've had that experience before, but then I ended up, going to a different company where I did have plenty of time, plenty of support in growing and learning. So see if you can do that. If you're not able to do it during work hours and you have the ability to, spend a little time outside of work hours, then great. So be realistic about how much time it might take you to do a difficult project. If somebody says to you, really want you to, develop this really difficult thing, you say, I want to do it, but just to be honest, it'll take me a little longer than somebody else. Are you okay with that? And a lot of, companies in the Des Moines area, they want to develop talent. And so you might find that they might be very supportive. But again, find safe spaces to experiment, be prepared to fail. You will have errors. It's just how it is. But again, if you reach out to different people, some of them can help you figure that out. Do lots of Googling, find lots of blogs. You should probably be able to, you can eventually solve it. You can eventually learn. And then also I highly recommend you learn a little bit about technologies outside of Salesforce. So for example, I used to be an English teacher, so I like books, but I had gotten a book on HTML and JavaScript, and I would just go read about HTML and JavaScript and CSS on my lunch break, So I highly recommend, trying to learn, at the very least, if you want to do Lightning components, learning HTML, CSS and JavaScript will definitely help you. If you're not a book learner like me, you could go to W3 Schools. They have lots of really cool tutorials where you can just do little snippets of code. You can run them, you can experiment with them and see what they do. So I highly recommend that. Salesforce Stack Exchange, many of you probably have encountered different posts on Salesforce Stack Exchange where there are some people who are providing solutions to different kinds of problems. Also, David Liu is a really great resource. I think a couple people on this call have taken some of his courses, but he specifically has like an academy. If you go to SFDC for the 99%, my window moved, SFDC99.com. David Liu has lots of good blogs and lots of good resources that can transition a person from an admin mindset to a developer mindset. So that's the end of my presentation. Any questions? Okay, I think Jerome's going to be taking it over. So
that was good stuff, Karen. Thank you. That was nice. The other place that I've gone for a lot of help is YouTube. There's some, I think David Liu has a channel out there as well. I was trying to think what the one that I know does a lot of dev type stuff, but YouTube is kind of starting to become a place where people are getting a lot of help with Salesforce. So there are a few trailblazers like myself out there that are helping people on YouTube. So you might get some help that direction too. But yeah, David Liu is awesome. Udemy has a lot of different resources out there for learning as well. If you want to pay for classes, I don't know, was that on your list? I'm not sure, Karen. If
no,
it wasn't.
I didn't. No, I didn't put that one down.
Yeah, they normally are going to charge you, or whoever put it together. But there's some good stuff there too. Karen, fantastic. You're awesome.
Yeah,
Hey, I have a quick question, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So
I think I was working with Karen maybe when she first started doing a lot of this transition.
Yeah,
So
I think you gave me the idea for maybe the first Lightning component I ever created. Like,
oh, well, I mean, if I did,
seriously.
great.
Yeah.
But so I know some of the kind of the requests and asks that were happening during that time frame, and so and Karen has aptitude for in growing her knowledge, and but was that something that you were kind of already thinking about doing, that transition?
Yeah, I had already started doing some trailheads. I always thought I had already thought that I kind of wanted to play around with coding, but it really wasn't until I went to Holmes Murphy where I had like that support, and that would allow me to like experiment and take on difficult challenges and allow growth.
And kind of what were you, and then were you kind of doing that, like, so before, if you had people that you were asking you about functionality and you were, you knew, okay, well that's right now, that's beyond my knowledge set. I know like what tool would be needed to do that, but I don't know how to do that. So, because that's kind of where I'm at right now. It's like, I want to be able to do more of those things, but I'm not a developer necessarily, like traditional developer. I straddle the lines, and if I'm doing things, I'm trying to do it through a flow or configuration, and I'm finding the limitations right now that you kind of see. And were you kind of doing that before too? You were like trying to solution things that you just hit walls with, and that kind of
No, before I came to Holmes Murphy, if I had an issue, I'd be like, Sulab, help me, or Terry, help me. So luckily that I was not a solo admin prior to that. So I had these other people that I could rely on. So I was not quite like you are, Kevin, but you should reach out. You know, we should, I'll bet there are a lot of people here who'd be happy to like work with you and try to talk to you about some of the problems you're
I do love this group, and I've actually been trying to not reconnect necessarily, but I've been missing a few of them sessions recently, and so the user groups, and I'm really trying to make it a focus again, because I think there's huge value in this group, and I do know many people that are involved that have helped me so far, and I know will continue to, and so I agree with you 100% on that.
Yeah, this is the best place. Terry, are you going to have any more boot camps coming up?
For admin?
For any of them, yeah.
Admin certification. Yeah, I'm trying not to compete directly with the Salesforce admin cert that we're doing at DMAC, but I will probably be doing another Salesforce admin study group. I'll probably kick it off mid-February, maybe after the DMAC class gets started. That way it's an option. I have not done a developer user group or a developer study group for that one. My situation maybe is a little bit like yours, Karen. I can do code. You probably do it faster than I do now, because I can't create a brand new Lightning component. I have people that will do that for me. And my thought is, I'm especially when people are paying me to do this stuff, I would much rather give it to somebody else who can write it faster than if I were to try to do it myself. It just feels like I would be overcharging. I can read it. I can tell you 100% what it can and can't do, but I would much rather turn it over to like a Jerome who lives and breathes code all day long, and who is about to talk to us next. And so he's got some cool things. Just a reminder, Jerome does lead the dev user group. And if this is a topic that has kind of piqued your interest, they would love to have you be a part of their user group. And Jerome, maybe you can kind of talk a little bit about how to get connected with your user group as well. That would be awesome. I did put in the chat window a link to the Slack channel that I just stood up. So if you are interested, or one of those that were interested in joining our admin group from a Slack channel perspective, that is out there now. Feel free to connect there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jerome.
All right, thank you. Hopefully you all can hear me.
Yes.
Excellent. Now, excuse me as I struggle to find the share button.
They hide it. It's the big green one right at the bottom of the screen.
All right.
Looks good.
Yeah, so thank you. I am Jerome Russ. As he mentioned, I run the developer user group, and normally Sulab would be here with us, and he is in India for the month of November. So if you, I guess, let me back up. So our developer user group kind of took a hiatus for 2021, but we will be starting up in Q1 2022, virtual for the first one. And then in that one, we're going to kind of ask about how people feel going forward. So if you do attend, you'll get to meet Sulab, who Karen had mentioned previously as well. So what I am going to talk about is going down this wonderful trail of a person who's using code, but keeping it mostly config. So it's kind of the, putting the toe in the water of development. And I am not the best at remembering what I've learned over the years versus what I need to present and say, hey, this is all the information you need. So I'm just going to apologize up front and say I'm probably going to spray you with a fire hose and think I'm doing a great job of explaining anything. So if you do need to jump in and get clarification, please do not hesitate. One thing about why we took that hiatus is because when we're talking through code, there is a point where you get to where you really need to understand the base concept, or else the next 15 minutes doesn't make that much sense. So if you ever hit that spot, please do jump out. I could go in and clarify, and then hopefully the rest of the talk will make sense. So with that said, I'm gonna jump in here. One thing I do in my everyday job is I work for Caffeinated Cloud. We're a consulting agency, but our specialty is doing development for smaller consultant agencies that do not have developers on staff. So if a small Salesforce consultant that mostly does admin config work needs to come and develop this bigger project that requires development, that's where they'd reach out to us and we would step in there for them. So we have this very unique look on, we're building stuff for admins specifically. So we always have that focus on who's going to maintain it going forward, because the hope would be obviously to not have to come back to us every time there's an update that's required. So we have that very admin Salesforce user like focus even as we're doing development work. And that is kind of what we're going to talk through today. So one of the big merges of config work and developers is what they call Apex defined types. So Apex, as you probably all have heard, is the software development language that developers use in Salesforce. So what Apex defined types is it acts as the data definition that in this context, flows can use as well as Apex. So in a flow, you can then say, okay, this is what our data will look like, and then pass it off to another flow, or as you'll see in a second, we can use it with invocable actions to tie the Apex into the flow a little tighter. So here are all my notes. Just in case this demo does not go well, I have a bunch of screenshots because I unfortunately know the pain of demos not working. Okay, so to start off, I just thought it was funny when Karen had mentioned developer editions, and when I was told I was going to do this, it's like, oh yeah, I should spin up a developer edition so I can go and put all of my components in here, and it's all just right there. So this is a great example of developer edition, using it just to go out and create something. All right, so what we will be building is a very simple flow, which I will demo here, where all we're going to do is we're going to take a city and state, we're going to make an API call out, and then we're going to do something with that data when it returns. So in this very, very simple example, we're just going to go out and we're going to get zip codes that all fall within Ankeny, Iowa. Very basic, but we're going to touch on a whole lot of concepts here. So we'll have a pretty good understanding if we ever need to do this in a different context. So to get started, there is an API called Zipopotamus, which has a fun little website. And all it is just a way to take zip codes and get cities, or take cities and get zip codes. So they put this out for free. So obviously we would normally be talking about authentication and there'd be payment involved, but these kind people at Zipopotamus were nice enough to give us an API just to play with here. And if you look down through the documentation, it's pretty straightforward. So hopefully when I show this one, it will be easy enough to follow. So for their API call, all they do is they require us to specify a country, a state, and a city. So these URL parameters are what they use to go and pull the zip codes related to those cities. They then return this JSON string down here, which has all the information we're curious about. So the only thing we're really using in our flow here is the post code. So one thing to notice with this JSON return is that there is a space here in the name. So we'll be handling that a little later. But whenever you encounter something that has a space, know you're going to have a little bit of extra work because spaces is not a valid variable in Apex. So there will be an extra step, and we'll kind of walk through that when we get there.
Jerome, quick question.
Yes.
For those that aren't familiar with JSON, talk us through what that is. I know that's what it is that we're looking at. How's it structured? Can you kind of explain that just a little bit?
Yes. Thank you, Terry.
Yeah.
So JSON in its most simplest form, let me just get rid of this. Oh, it's not letting me. Let me copy this whole thing and open it in a different window. Okay, so this is that same JSON. I'm just going to be able to manipulate it over here. So in its most basic form, JSON is just a data format where you have attributes followed by a colon, and then whatever the data is on the right side. So in this example, it's all text here, but you can have numbers, or you can have even more attributes where they're nested like this. So when you're looking at the API, this is the attribute, and then everything to the right is the data. So in our example here, the place name is Ankeny, the state is Iowa, and then the zip code is located in the places attribute, which then goes and has these objects down here. So
it's kind of like a field and the field's value then, sort of.
Yeah, very much.
Kind of simplistic way of thinking about it.
Yeah. So let's turn it into Salesforce language.
Yeah.
So this would be like a related list, and then you have all of the relations down here that you could read into. Over here would just be a field value.
Cool.
All right. This might make more sense a little later when we start using the data as well. So hopefully that is the case. So in our example, we called Ankeny, Iowa, and there were the 3 zip codes. So what we saw on the screen was us gathering the postcodes from these 3 places right here. All right, so how do we actually go about getting those? So in our flow, we just have a simple screen where we just get the city and state. Nothing special here, it's just text boxes where we're gathering it. So as Karen mentioned in her talk, there's invocable actions, where if you want to do something a little more complex, you can call Apex. That is what we're using here. So we are calling this get zippopotamus Apex action. And we're just passing that city and state that was entered. And now for the most confusing part of the talk, going to show that code so we can have a better idea of what's happening. Okay, so in invocable actions, you pass in the request. So this is a little complicated because Salesforce wants you to bulkify everything. So even though in our example, we're doing a screen flow and there would only ever be 1 request coming in, we still need it to be bulkified. So that's why this is a list of requests, even though, as I said, we're only doing 1 at a time. So this request contains our city and state. And up here, we're going to loop over those requests. So this is the part where, like, if we were doing it strictly via code, we could skip this looping because we could just make it 1 for 1. But all we're doing is we're calling get zippopotamus and passing that city and state. So that get zippopotamus is just doing the API call that was in that postman call out that we just showed. And I guess I should start with, this is definitely the developer portion of it. So if you're looking at it from as a pure admin coming in and doing that, this would be where you would reach out, tap somebody on the shoulder and say, hey, can you do this one section for me?
Jerome, you know what? You could make direct comparisons between all these pieces and what people do in flows. Like if you know, like what he's doing is pretty much what you are already doing in a flow in many respects. You know what a loop is in flow, or many of you do. A list would be like a collection variable, right? Anytime you are adding something, it's kind of like an assignment an assignment element, you know? So if that's your experience, you can make some correlations between those.
Yeah, that is very true. The more you get into flows and start thinking in those ways, I think you can make those connections, and it makes it much more meaningful when you start reading through and talking about those different collection mechanisms. So the get zippopotamus, all we're doing is we're calling that API and we're passing that state and city. And when it returns in Apex, we're just checking to make sure it works. So as noted, if you were doing this in production, you'd want to do something with if it doesn't work, so you don't just let it crash. But this is demo world. So if it does succeed, we format it using this zippopotamus class. Now, this is where Apex defined types is really cool, because a nice individual went out and created this piece of software called JSON to Apex. And beyond just using it in flows, I actually come out and use this whenever somebody has a new API that doesn't have anything specific. So I would come and I would take the payload that their API is giving me and paste it in here to build it. So that expected API, you just paste it in here. And I kind of simplified it just so it all fit in this one picture. So then when you say create Apex, what's going to happen, if I pull it over, is we now have that JSON structure, but defined in Apex. If a developer ever tells you you need to pass something a specific way, this right here will get you 90% of the way you need to. So the extra steps is related to that space that I had mentioned earlier. So in my case, I just went and touched them up by removing the spaces. And then in that Apex code, I said anywhere there is a place space name, just replace it with place name. So I went a very kind of brute force way to get around it for the demo. But once you're here, you need to then tell Apex that you can use it in a flow. And that's what this invocable variable will do. Oops, one too many. So that invocable variable step says you can define it in flows. So now that JSON object we had, we can now tell our flow, let's use this zippopotamus class and start defining or reading the variables defined here. Now in flows, there is one gotcha that even though I'm calling it a gotcha, I'm gonna still do it, is inner classes cannot be referenced in flows. So here, what I do is I always just pull this out and create a new class. And so we would call this a Zippo place. And then over here, instead of places, we would just call it Zippo place. And this way, here later on, I can show you that we're able to then use these variables as well, because it is now, instead of being an inner class of Zippopotamus, it is now its own class of Zippo place. So we can define those variables as a Zippo place. All right. So we have all of that set up. So what we define here is we're calling the city and state. In the flow, it's going to return us those places. So what we're doing here is we're looping over those places so we can gather up the different zip codes for that message we display at the end. So all we're doing is looping over the places. And then I created this zip code detail formula just because I was going to do a fancier message and kind of ran out of time. But this shows you that we can use that postcode. So that work we did to make the Zippo place, well, we can now reference those attributes in flow because they are defined as invocable variables.
So Jerome, let me ask this question. If I am an admin and I needed to, within flow, have, in essence, build something like this where I could pass in a city and state and have it return the zip codes for me, how do I communicate that? What's the right way to communicate what I would need my developer to do for me?
Okay, so the one piece of developer heavy work that you would be doing there would be the invocable method where, so in flow, it would be this get zip step right here. So you would need a method where you, so if I was just being handed this project, you would say, I need to pass you the city and state. And then in this example, we already know the response, but you would say, and I want the zip code or a list of zip codes in response. So then the developer would go, okay, well, there's this cool Zippopotamus API that I could use to do that. And then this method would get built in response. So typically, and why I'm saying this is probably still developer oriented, this one method would be developer oriented. It's because you typically don't have an open API you're using. It's normally something authenticated, and then you have the security steps involved and all of that. So it'd still probably be a developer doing this one step, but it would really just be the call out at this point. You would then have the admin be able to come in and do all the mapping afterwards. So if this was like a full-on integration and you're sending a customer to Oracle Cloud, so now instead of a developer having to come up with some mechanism for an admin to go in and map, you can just use your Apex define type and say, okay, this Oracle field maps to this Salesforce field. And you can just do that in a flow. And that way it's always an admin who's the one that's doing that mapping.
Very cool.
So then we're just adding it to the zip code list. That detail, it has the break, which is what puts it on the next line. And then once we're done, we just display the zip codes down here. So we're referencing the city and state you put in, and then that zip code list that we built from that loop. And there you go. So historically, before Apex define types, you would have to do all this using just strings. So it would essentially be give me a city and state, and then the developer would do all of the display output down here. This couldn't have been done in a flow prior, because only Apex would be able to read that response from the API call. So now that we can define what those responses look like, admins can come in and maintain these REST API calls. And I've already done several integrations using this method. And now that they've introduced asynchronous flows, I forget what they specifically call them, but in record triggered flows, you can now have an asynchronous path. So using this method in that asynchronous path to pass data to an external system is extremely powerful.
And asynchronous means?
Thank you. So whenever you do a record update and the record is locked as it's processing all the triggers and flows and workflow rules, they don't allow you to do callouts in that. So developers have had to do a special call to go and have this secondary thread that works behind the scenes do other calculations. And there's our typical long running calculations. So all asynchronous is instead of being in that main thread, it just kicks off a secondary job behind the scenes that continues on and does further processing while that record is already saved, and the user is able to continue on. All right, so I did set that up just to show it, and it is most, I think Zoom is blocking my other window. Let me move some stuff. So to show what that would look like is here, just if an account is created. Again, I know it's a silly example, especially since Salesforce has their Google Maps lookup already. But let's say we wanted to know the zip code for their billing city and billing state. So we can use this same method on a record triggered flow. And then there's the run asynchronously. So it goes and it gets it. And instead of displaying it to the user, I'm just putting it in the description right there. So just to see it run. Oh yeah, so one thing to notice when you do check this include a run asynchronously path checkbox is now when you go to debug, you have a path for debug run where you have to select run asynchronously. Otherwise, you do this run immediately path. I have a test account out there. And it goes through all these wonderful steps. And then down here in the record update, you see that we include that message. So again, I know this is a simple example, but if you were integrating, if you needed to like fire off whenever an order comes through and you want to, ping some external system, we now have a mechanism where an admin can be the one who manages all that, and you don't need to rely on a developer going in and making those changes all the time. All right, was that thoroughly confusing for everyone?
Anybody have any thoughts on how you might leverage something like that in your org? Now we've got a couple people from REG on here, and one of the things that we've talked about up there is the ability to grab index pricing. So go out to like the app exchange, or not app exchange, the stock market, grab pricing information and bring that back into Salesforce. That would be a great example, almost identical to what you're doing here, Jerome.
Actually, I was going to use crypto as my example, and then it crashed yesterday. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that one. I'm switching it back to the zip code one.
Yeah.
So yeah, the one of the cooler scenarios I've had with this method is using it for calling out to weather and seeing what the weather is in certain areas. Just because, some businesses, you kind of need it to be outdoors when you're going and walking on, if you're going to check out a property, you'd want it to be somewhat good weather. So if you're going to go to a town quite a ways away, you'd want to know the weather over there. So calling a weather API, they set it up so it was actually a flow that does that. And so when you go to check out the record in Salesforce, it would look at that address and say what the weather was going to be over the next 5 days.
So that'd be kind of cool if you're in a call center environment or a sales environment, you're wanting to make phone calls. What's the good time to call them? You don't want to call them if they're in the middle of a storm. Or even you could do one that would return, and I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but what's the time of day for them for that record? That'd be another kind of simple one that would work. Very cool.
Yeah. And then if you do ever want to just go and learn about APIs, there's a fun list where they include things that you can easily go do. And of course, everybody loves cats. So you could go and just make a random cat generator just to show off that you know how to do APIs and flows now.
That is actually the first time I've ever seen the asynchronous process like live in a flow. So I really appreciated seeing that.
Excellent. Yeah, that one, when they announced that, ideas started shooting off where it's like, okay, well, about 30% of the projects I've did the last 5 years could probably be replaced with that. So
that's nice.
Yeah.
That's actually the first time I've seen that too, Kevin. That's very cool.
All right. So if there's no other questions on that, there's one more thing I wanted to mention. So I guess I should pause. Okay. So if there's no questions. All right. So they also introduced custom property editors. And what this is, and when I tried to deploy it earlier, it failed. So that was one thing where I'm glad I had my backup. So just to show what a custom property editor is, in flows, you would be able to, or actually Lightning Pages as well, you can say, here's the input, and the admin can input that. What a custom property editor does is it lets a developer define what that input looks like. So let's see. Let me pull up a flow where it shows the typical inputs. So here, when you would, again, I know it's contrived, sorry, but if you wanted to specify in their example the volume, then you would enter an integer. So if you wanted a max volume, 100, if you wanted it 70, if you tried to enter something else, it would give you an error message saying you need it to be a number. So you'd have to manually go back and enter it. And you can specify min and max and kind of control it that way. But with a custom property editor, you can reach out to a developer or hit up Trailhead and learn how to do these. And then you would be able to specify the UI that fits the situation better. So in a volume, they show a slider here. And so instead of having to enter in the digits, you can use the slider to specify it. And then whenever the flow runs, it's going to be able to take that, that value and use it later on, just like if you entered the digits. So even though this is just an integer, there's a ton of use cases for this one. So if you were building a flow and you needed, the admin to go in and you wanted them to select from specific values, you used to be able to do a pick list, but it was static. You had to say, here's the values. Well, with these editors, you can make it dynamic and have at runtime, when the admin is going in and doing it, go and pull the latest list of selected values. So you're no longer having to maintain that list. You can now have that housed somewhere else, or pull it dynamically from records in Salesforce. So it really opens the door to being able to have the admin like control what they're able to select more, and not have to have their second monitor up with available selections for the different ones. You can change the UI to match the component you're building. Right. And then, as you mentioned, developer user group, we took a break in 2021. We're starting up again, starting virtual for our first one. When Sulab gets back, that will be the first thing we're discussing, is what will be on it and when it will be. So stay tuned for that. And as far as going beyond virtual and meeting in person, based on our attendance, we're going to get a feel for how they feel about that. Right. Any other questions? Excellent. All right, back to you, Terry.
Awesome, very good, thank you. I'm just putting in the chat window the links for everything off of the announcements. I forgot to do that earlier, so if you're wondering what all that was, that is why you're getting pinged. Boone, you had a question. How do we hear about the first meeting when the first dev meeting is set? So maybe Jerome, if you can find your event page link on Bevy and toss that in the chat.
All right, will do.
That would work. Any other questions that you have for either Karen or Jerome? It's amazing the things that you can do with, I know we're going to get into flow again a lot more again next year, but the things that you can do when you partner up with a dev person in flow is almost unlimited. It kind of feels that way. So tons of stuff. And sometimes it's just thinking outside of the box and knowing what you can do on the flow side. And then where you do run into the limits, reaching out to somebody that can help you with some code. And odds are you'll be able to manage whatever it is you want to do in kind of a shared environment like that. So very cool stuff. Jerome, that's awesome. I'd never actually even thought about running an API out of a flow, but that makes total sense to do what you just did there. That's pretty cool. I like that.